So Taliban, they seem that they don't care about recognition by other countries, and they already announced their cabinet without women, and they also raised their flag. What
Mhm.
other leverage U.S. is left to make them respect and value women rights in Afghanistan?
Well, I'm afraid to say that I think, the United States of America has lost so much of its leverage in Afghanistan and its ability to negotiate in any way that's meaningful with the Taliban. Our discussions over these last 5, 6, years have brought us to this point. So I'm not, and some of the ability that we had, of course, on the ground with our military presence, with our intelligence capabilities on the ground, we don't have that now. So the United States position, the current, position is that the Taliban seeks to be recognized as a legitimate government, a legitimate power, and in seeking that legitimacy, that they will negotiate and work with other, nations of the world. I think that really remains to be seen. Perhaps because, we're heading into a period of such great humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. You read the front pages of the newspapers here in the West, and they're already saying the food insecurity in particular, and now as we're heading into the winter in Afghanistan and the harsh conditions, that it will be debilitating. It will be terrible for Afghanistan. So that may be a point of leverage. The humanitarian crisis that's on the doorstep of Afghanistan. So I hope that can be used to, force that regime to address the true needs of its people.
Qatar government asked the Taliban to respect women's rights. We follow that. What's your reaction about it? Do you think Taliban will listen to Qatar?
Well, Qatar obviously has played a very pivotal role over these last few years, and since the first office for the Taliban was announced, I believe that was in 2014 during the Obama administration, and the Obama administration supported that, and Qatar has been a host for a lot of the Taliban prisoners who were released from Guantanamo. All of these, indications would tell you that Qatar plays a major role, or wants to play a role, and clearly in this last month, by allowing refugees to arrive there, letting aircraft, go in and out of Afghanistan to Qatar. So they clearly are playing a role. And, I would hope for the nations like the United States of America and others in then the region can have faith in their efforts to try and bring some stability to Afghanistan and try and enforce some protections for women and children.
So Afghan Women Council has done a lot of work for Afghan women education. And Taliban recently also says that women can continue education with the segregating of gender, like men and women separate. What is U.S. wanted to achieve in 2 decades for Afghan women?
This is really such an important question to raise, because for 20 years, for 2 decades, the U.S. and private citizens in our country have really invested a great deal in the education system at all levels of Afghanistan, working hand in hand with the Afghans. The fact is, in 2001, when we learned, and the world learned, and we should have known before this, but when we learned that young girls and women were denied an education, were not given an opportunity, to be full participants in their country, educate themselves, get a job. This became a priority for us. It became a priority for the Bush administration. It was a priority for First Lady Laura Bush, that education was one of the top 4 pillars of engagement for the U.S. Afghan Women's Council. And so much incredible work and progress was made from the millions of children and girls that were in school, and then able to, over these 2 decades, go on to higher education levels and be able to be gainfully employed in all sectors of society. This was incredible progress. And it was, it was something worth fighting for. And it was, a major rule of engagement for the United States, and really for other countries that we partnered with too around the world: Britain, Italy, France, New Zealand, Australia. There was a collaboration amongst, freedom-loving peoples, that women had a right to be educated and be full participants in their society. And I think Afghans and Afghan women should be very proud of the progress that they made under very difficult circumstances, particularly as the security situation began to deteriorate in the last 5, 6, 7 years. They found innovative ways to stay engaged and continue contributing to their society. And I think one of the most important things is to remember too about where we are now, 20 years later. This is a new generation of Afghan women, and women who are 20, 21, 22, 23 years old. They don't know another Afghanistan. They don't know an Afghanistan that denies them an education or a chance to work. And we see this, that they are at great risk, once again, trying to fight back for their rights.
So Taliban continue imposing stricter rules on women, including mandatory hijab, and also now they're saying if you have a face open, you have to pay a fine. So there are a lot of restriction adding, repressing women. But as you saw, a lot of women were the forefront of these protests lately. They're fighting for their rights. So what has to be done? How do you see the future of Afghan women standing for what they achieve against the Taliban?
Well, I have never met more resilient, strong women in my life than the women of Afghanistan that I've had the privilege to get to know, and work with and support and mentor for these last 2 decades. And it doesn't surprise me that they are taking to the streets, some of them, to be the voices for women who may be afraid to do so, but they're standing up for all women in Afghanistan, and they're standing up for children. And what I worry about is that if there is no access to media, that the world won't see this and won't see the bravery of Afghan women who want to make sure the world does not forget them. And this is where the UN can play a major role, and countries who are still engaged in Afghanistan, China, who has a vested interest in benefiting from Afghanistan and all it has to offer. Those countries, pressure needs to be put on them if they want to stay engaged in Afghanistan, that they can't let women's voices be silenced. It's just not right. In the 21st century, this is not how anybody should be living their life.
When I talk to Afghan women, they feel that with the U.S., with no presence of U.S. forces or U.S. in Afghanistan, including the embassy left, they feel like abandoned or forgotten. And also many women were left behind from evacuation, which they deserve to leave, but they were so scared to get to the airport, or they couldn't make it to the flight. What will happen to them? Do you have any idea in the future that they will be helped or they will be taken care of? or they might be able to leave the country?
This is the biggest heartbreak of us here, you know, for many Americans who felt the way we departed Afghanistan was such a stain on our moral authority, and we're not sure who it helped. It certainly didn't help U.S. stature in the world. It didn't help the Afghans, the chaotic departure, the continued loss of life, including 13 young Americans on their first deployment sent there to help with the rescue and departure of Afghans who wanted to leave and Americans who needed to get out. This is a heartbreak for us. It's an embarrassment on a lot of levels. I'm not sure what the future is for everybody who is left behind that wants to get out. I know there are some brave people, Americans and other Western countries, that have managed to get some of their veterans, military veterans, who are willing to operate on the ground there quietly, underground, to still try and get people out. And they'll continue to do that as long as they can and are willing to do that. And I applaud that. And I think I also heard, you know, last week that our U.S. government now and our U.S. military, our leadership in the military and at the State Department, have met with these veteran groups, understanding that they have to work alongside them and get their help, get the help of these private groups who are willing to risk everything to try and get Americans and Afghans out. The reality, the sad reality, is not everybody that wants to get out is going to get out. It's just that's extremely difficult to achieve that. But I do know there are groups who will not give up as long as they can continue to get in there